Paal and Paal and Esben Ash Lad is the story for tonight. And as always, we call upon the ancestors to bring the story to us. We ask our faith, such as it is, to come and join us and walk alongside of us. For myself, I ask that Jesus Christ come and walk beside me as we enter into and join our story for this evening. There once was a kingdom, ruled by a king who lived in a castle upon a high hilltop, very rocky hilltop. And in the courtyard of this castle grew a massive oak tree. And this oak tree was so large that it shaded out the entire wing of the castle where the residences were. And the king longed to be able to see the morning sunshine streaming in through his windows upon waking in the morning. And he had long since had a price placed as a generous reward to anyone who could manage to cut down the oak tree. Well, as it turns out, this oak tree was of a magical nature, and any time somebody attempted to chop it down, for every chip that was chopped, two would grow in its place. And so the oak tree remained standing for many a year. And also, all of the neighbors had a functioning well. But being as high as the castle was upon a rocky hilltop, the bedrock below the castle courtyard was very unforgiving, and none could dig below it. And there had also been quite a price placed as a reward for anyone who could dig the king a well. Well, years and years passed by, and none could accomplish the task. Till at last the king decided that it was time to up the reward and see who might come from faraway lands that may be able to accomplish the task. And so it was he sent out to all of the churches of the land to spread to all the other churches of all the other lands the great decree that whoever should be able to chop down the oak and dig a well should earn his daughter's hand in marriage, as well as half the kingdom. The call rang out. All of the churches sent their messengers to all of the churches, and all of the land and the surrounding lands heard the call. Well, as it turns out, our dear fellows, Paal, and Esben Ash Lad, three brothers living together in a very small farmhouse with their father, who was a widow, and had long been a very poor and starving household. In fact, things were getting worse by the day, and shortly before the king's decree, the father had told the three sons they were going to have to go out into the world, where they must find their own fortunes, for if they stayed with him, all of them would surely starve. For it had been a long time since the father was able to grow enough food to feed them all. So, as it happens, when one of the church riders came a-calling to the house, spreading the decree, all three brothers jumped joyously at the chance to answer the call and journey to the castle. Well, the two older brothers liked to pick on the younger brother, And when he was packing and getting ready to go along with them, they jeered and teased, actually quite harassing, if I might say so myself, about how useless the poor boy was, and how he'd never served anyone, always rolling around in the ashes all the time. What good could he possibly do? And besides, they, the two older, stronger brothers, would most definitely be the ones to chop down the oak, dig the well, and win the princess's hand in marriage. So why was he even going along? Well, the young lad said, I'll just kind of tag along and see what happens. I've always wanted to see more of the world, and I've always been curious about what lies out there, so yeah, I'll go ahead and I will go along with you guys, and I'm sure you'll win the princess, but I just want to watch. And so the three of them set out the very next morning. And as they walked up along the high passes of the mountain hills, heading on down over across the plains to the king's castle, climbing up to the top of the high ridge where a high pine forest lay, Esben heard a soft chop, 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 chopping sound. And he let his two older brothers know that he wanted to go up and explore what might be up there making this mysterious chopping sound. Well, of course, the two older brothers laughed. Ugh! It's just some woodcutter up in the woods. Why do you always have to go wandering off? Why can't you just stay put and follow along? Always wandering, wandering, wandering. Need to see this, need to see that. Just sit still. Well, Esben did not sit still. And he decided to wander on up the hill. And the two older brothers went a little further down the road where they made camp, having to wait for their younger brother. Well, as Esben climbed up into the high pine forest, following the chop, chop, choppity chop, he came upon a mysterious axe chopping at a tree all by itself. And Esben asked the axe, "What are you doing here?" The axe replied, "Chop, chop, chopping away, waiting for you." "Waiting for me? Well, here I am." And the axe stopped chopping long enough for Esben to grab it up, remove the axe head from the axe handle, and place it in his pack. And there he went, wandering back to his two older brothers, who, of course, laughing at him, jeering, "What did you find up on the hill?" "Oh, just an axe chopping. Nothing special." And the two older brothers laughed and laughed and laughed. They spent the night and set out again the very next morning. Well, again, as they moved on through the forest and started to cross over a high plateau, off in the distance, Esben heard the sound of dig, dig, dig. Dig, dig, diggity dig, 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 dig. And he wanted to know what that sound was. And so he told his older brothers that he was going to go explore what this digging sound was. And the older brothers laughed and laughed and jeered and teased as they were wont to do. But Esben went anyway, and they grumbled their way a little ways down the pathway and set up camp to wait for him again. And as he climbed up onto the open plateau, there he found a hoe, digging and digging and digging into the ground. And Esben asked, "Why, hoe, what are you doing here?" And the garden hoe replied, "Why, I am here just digging away, waiting for you." "Waiting for me? Really?" And the hoe stopped digging long enough for Esben Ash Lad to take off the top of the hoe from the handle and place them in his bag. And he returned to his brothers, who, of course, laughed and jeered and teased. "What did you find up there on the hill?" What was making the digging sound? Oh, it was just a garden hoe. Nothing special. No big deal. But it was fun to see. And the older brothers laughed and laughed and laughed. And so it was. They spent the night, and the next day they continued on their way. Well, sure enough, in the afternoon, something caught Esben Ash Lad's attention yet again. It was a seep and trickle sound of a small little water brook that crossed their path, that the two older brothers stepped over without even noticing. And Esben decided to let them know he wanted to follow the water to see where it led and where it was coming from. The older brothers grumbled and grumbled, teased and jeered, and wandered their way a little further down the road to set up camp and wait for Esben. Well, Esben climbed up through the rocky crags, following the seep and trickle, until at last he came to the tiniest little spot where you could almost not even see the water anymore, and yet still he could hear seep, trickle, and gently brushing away a little bit of leafy, mossy tufts, should he find a walnut that was seeping and trickling little drops of water, building into the stream that he had followed. And Esben asked the walnut, "What are you doing here?" And the walnut said, "Seep and trickle, I've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me? Wow!" And Esben took the little tuft of moss, stuck it in the hole, picked up the walnut so that it would not seep and trickle anymore, and put it in his pack, and wandered on back down to his brothers. Well, they were not too far from the castle now, and within another day and a half of journeying, they found their way to the king's palace. And there they were invited in. And when they said that they had come to chop down the oak tree and build the well, the oldest brother pushed forward, saying, "I shall do it, for I am the eldest, and I have come for your daughter." The king informed them that he was quite tired of all the other people that had come and failed, for the oak tree was now twice the size it was before. For if you remember, anyone who tried to chop any chip that came out, two would grow in its place. And so it was, the king had imposed a consequence for failure, that anyone who should fail in the task would be rowed out to a nearby island on the lake, and there they would have their ears chopped off. Well, the older brother was not afraid, and bravely went forward to chop, and he could not do it. Every axe chip, two more grew in its place, and the king's servants pulled him off from trying, clearly as he was failing, carried him down to the boats, rowed him over to the island, and his ears were chopped off. Well, the second oldest brother, still raring to try, knowing his older brother was not as strong as he, and that he would chop down the tree, went to the king and said that he would try. And the king warned him, "Failure shall result in banishment to the island and your ears chopped off." Well, as was happened before, happened again. And the second oldest brother could not chop down the tree. The servants pulled him off, and for being so disobedient and daring to try when clearly he was not able to, his ears were sliced off even closer than his older brothers. Well, the next day Esben went to the king, and very politely asked the king, "Might I give it a try?" The king looked at him. "If you are wont to walk around with no ears, I can oblige you right now. Why waste the trouble?" "Well, still, I would like to try, just to try, and see what happens. May I?" It's your ears. And so Esben went to the oak tree. But he did not pick up any of the axes in the courtyard. In fact, he set down his bag, and he pulled out the axe head and the axe handle, put the axe head back on, and said to the axe, "Chop for me." And the axe chopped and chopped and chopped and chopped, and before you knew it, the old oak tree was down. And the whole court was amazed. And then Esben went to a corner where the king had wanted a well, and he pulled out the hoe, put the hoe back on its handle, and asked the hoe, "Will you dig for me?" And the hoe went to diggin' and diggin' and diggin', dig, dig, diggity dig, right down through the bedrock as though it were soft as butter. And then, once the hole was dug, Esben again removed the head from the hoe and from the axe, placing them in his pack. Pulling out the walnut, he climbed down into the hole of the well, removed the moss, and asked the walnut, "Will you seep and trickle for me?" And seep and trickle, and seep and trickle did the walnut go for Esben Ash Lad. And before you knew it, the well was filled clear to the brim, and the king's wishes were fulfilled. Esben Ash Lad won the hand of the daughter, and within the week they were married with great celebrating and feasting. And, as it turns out, it was probably a good thing that the brothers had no ears, for they no longer had to walk around, hearing that Esben Ash Lad's wandering is exactly what allowed him to succeed.